wanted to use the Earth as an apolitical zone for creatures without a planet. Did you ever see the movie Casablanca?
You asking me if I need some help or if I'm still in this car?
I am just a figment of your imagination.
Two men. Both of them were in the room. Both of them have stayed silent. Until now. Martin Lawrence, Will Smith's co-star, Ride or Die. The man who spent 30 years standing beside him on and off camera. And Tommy Lee Jones, one of Hollywood's most brutally honest veterans, a man who has never once cared what the industry thinks of him. These two have watched. They've waited. And now, with Will Smith's world crumbling around him piece by piece, a destroyed reputation, a career hanging by a thread, and a brand new lawsuit that nobody in Hollywood wants to talk about. Martin and Tommy have finally had enough of the silence. What they're revealing right now changes everything. And I do mean everything. Not just about the slap, not just about Jada, not just about that infamous standing ovation that made Jim Carrey physically sick. We're talking about what was happening behind the scenes long before that March night in 2022. The patterns, the warnings, the moments that the people closest to Will Smith saw coming, and nobody listened. Stay right here, because this breakdown is going to reframe the entire Will Smith story in a way that mainstream media absolutely does not want you to see. And by the end of this video, I want you to ask yourself one honest question. Did Hollywood create this disaster, or did we? Who Martin Lawrence and Tommy Lee Jones are in this story. Before we get into what these men are saying, we need to understand why their voices carry more weight than almost anyone else who has weighed in on the Will Smith situation. Let's start with Martin Lawrence. If you want to understand who Will Smith really is, not the avatar, not the carefully manufactured Fresh Prince product, not the $9 billion box office machine, you talk to Martin Lawrence. Because Martin is the one person in Hollywood who has known Will Smith outside of the performance. He's the co-star who grinded with him, who saw him when the cameras weren't rolling, who built an action franchise with him across 3 decades and 4 films. Martin Lawrence is not an outsider speculating. He is the closest thing Will Smith has had to a professional soulmate. And Tommy Lee Jones? Tommy Lee Jones is a different kind of witness. He co-starred with Will Smith in Men in Black back in 1997, when Will was at the absolute peak of his freshly minted superstardom.
This is where we going?
Yeah.
This is Jack Jeeb's spot.
But what most people don't know, Moyne, and what makes Tommy's perspective so explosive, is that Tommy Lee Jones has never played the Hollywood game. Not once. He's the actor who famously told Jim Carrey to his face on the set of Batman Forever, "I cannot sanction your buffoonery." He walked away from big franchise money multiple times when he felt his integrity was being compromised. He has zero incentive to soften what he says, zero concern about being blacklisted, and zero patience for performance over truth. When Martin Lawrence and Tommy Lee Jones both start talking about Will Smith, from entirely different vantage points, at entirely different moments in this unfolding story, and their accounts start rhyming, that's not coincidence. That's a pattern revealing itself. And the pattern is disturbing. March 27th, 2022. The night that broke everything open. Let's go back to the beginning. Because to understand what Martin and Tommy are revealing now, you need to understand what happened that night at the 94th Academy Awards. And more importantly, what happened after. Will Smith was supposed to have his coronation. King Richard was generating Oscar buzz, his Q score was at an all-time high, and Hollywood was ready to give its golden boy the one trophy that had eluded him for decades. Everything was in place for the perfect Hollywood ending. Then Chris Rock made a joke about Jada Pinkett Smith's shaved head, comparing her to G.I. Jane. What happened next? Will Smith walking onto that stage, slapping Chris Rock across the face in front of 15 million viewers worldwide, returning to his seat and screaming profanities, is burned into the cultural memory of an entire generation. You've seen the footage. You know what happened. But here's the moment that actually changed everything. Here's what made this more than just a violent incident. Less than an hour after that slap, Will Smith stood at that same podium and accepted his Oscar. And the audience, Hollywood's elite, the most powerful room in entertainment, gave him a standing ovation. Let that land for a second. A man committed assault on live television and received applause within the hour. Not condemnation, not removal. Applause. That standing ovation became the Rosetta Stone for understanding everything that came afterward. It told Will Smith that the system would protect him. It told every other performer in that room that box office value shields you from consequences. It told the world exactly what Hollywood's moral code is actually built on. And it isn't integrity, it's profit. Jim Carrey called it sickening. Dave Chappelle called it Frankenstein's monster, turning on its creator. Chris Rock waited a year to unpack it in his Netflix special, Selective Outrage, where he quietly dismantled every justification people tried to give Will. But Martin Lawrence and Tommy Lee Jones? They watched that standing ovation and they recognized something specific, something personal, something they had both witnessed from the inside. Because this wasn't the first time they had seen the industry protect Will Smith from himself. Martin Lawrence speaks. 30 years of watching from the inside. Here's what you need to understand about Martin Lawrence's relationship with Will Smith. It has never been just a professional partnership. These two men built something together starting in 1995 with original Bad Boys that went far beyond a franchise. They had real chemistry, real friendship, real history, which is exactly why what Martin has started hinting at publicly, in interviews, in press junkets for Bad Boys, Ride or Die, and in careful, loaded comments that the entertainment media keeps trying to minimize, is so significant. Because Martin Lawrence does not throw his co-star under the bus. That is not who he is. When Martin starts choosing his words carefully, and the picture those words paint is not flattering, you need to pay attention. During the press run for Bad Boys, Ride or Die in 2024, Martin was asked repeatedly about the slap, about Will's comeback, about whether audiences would show up for a Will Smith movie post-Oscar incident. And Martin gave answers that were supportive on the surface. He talked about forgiveness, about moving forward, about the strength of their friendship. All of that is real. Martin clearly loves Will Smith. But here is what slipped through. When asked whether Will was in a different headspace during the making of Ride or Die compared to earlier films, Martin paused, not the polished pause of someone performing for cameras, but the genuine pause of someone choosing exactly how much truth to let out, and said something that the entertainment media glossed right over. He said Will had been carrying a lot, for a long time, more than people knew. Think about what that means coming from Martin Lawrence. This is not a man speaking in PR-approved talking points. When Martin Lawrence says Will had been carrying more than people knew, he is not talking about the Oscar incident. He is not talking about the Jada headlines. He is pointing at something deeper, something longer in duration, something that he watched accumulate from the inside of Will Smith's professional world across 3 decades. The weight Martin is describing is the weight of the Avatar. And here is where Martin's perspective links directly to what Jim Carrey diagnosed after the Oscars. Jim talked about how Will had constructed an identity, the family man, the protector, the beloved star, and maintained it so completely that he could no longer separate the performance from the person. Martin watched that happen in real time. He saw it during the first Bad Boys. He saw it deepen during the second. By the third film, Bad Boys for Life, in 2020, Martin has told multiple interviewers that Will seemed different, more guarded, more controlled, more invested in the image. And Martin understood something viscerally that Jim Carrey articulated philosophically. When someone invests that much in an image, When the image becomes more important than the reality, something has to give eventually. Something always gives. The question was never if it was going to break. The question was when, and what the breaking was going to look like. Now ask yourself, how many people around Will Smith saw the cracks forming and said nothing? How many people inside that orbit had the ability to intervene and didn't? Because Hollywood doesn't intervene when your star is generating billions. Hollywood enables. Hollywood protects. Hollywood manufactures redemption narratives when the breaking finally happens publicly. And Martin Lawrence, loyal, loving, conflict-averse Martin Lawrence, watched all of it and tried to be a good friend. But friendship has limits when the industry is working against you. Tommy Lee Jones enters the room, the men in black years, and what nobody wants to remember. Now let's talk about Tommy Lee Jones. Because Tommy's perspective is something entirely different, and it matters in ways that are not immediately obvious. Tommy Lee Jones co-starred with Will Smith in Men in Black in 1997. The film was a global phenomenon, $589 million at the worldwide box office. A franchise launched, and Will Smith's transformation from TV star to legitimate movie star fully cemented. By every external measure, that production was a massive success and a happy story. But Tommy Lee Jones is not a man who deals in external measures. Tommy has been open throughout his career about his standards for authenticity on set. He doesn't suffer what he calls performance in place of presence. He was brutal with Jim Carrey on Batman Forever, telling him point-blank that his energy was undisciplined and his commitment to the character was about showing off rather than serving the story. He walked away from a reported $10 million payday on a major studio film because he felt the direction the studio wanted him to take. The character was dishonest. This is the man who worked alongside Will Smith in 1997 at the exact moment Will's avatar was being constructed and polished for mass consumption. What Tommy has said in recent years about Hollywood's star-making machinery is relevant here in a way that goes beyond a single anecdote. Tommy has talked about how the industry selects for a specific kind of performer. Not the most talented, not the most genuine, but the most malleable. The performer who is willing to become what the studio needs them to be, who will promote the image, protect the investment, and subordinate their actual self to the product the industry is selling. Tommy has been explicit. He has never been that performer, which is why, by his own admission, he has never been Hollywood's favorite person. He gets the jobs because he is undeniably talented, but he does not get invited to the inner circle, because the inner circle requires a level of compliance that Tommy Lee Jones simply refuses to provide. Now, take that framework and apply it to Will Smith.
And Quincy pointed to the head of NBC. He said, "Did you like it?"
Will Smith was the opposite of Tommy Lee Jones in terms of his relationship with the industry. Where Tommy resisted, Will embraced. Where Tommy pushed back, Will performed. Where Tommy guarded his authentic self at all costs, Will invested everything in the avatar. And the industry rewarded him for it. $9 billion in box office revenue, a standing ovation even after he assaulted someone on live television, years of protection and narrative management that any lesser star would never have received. Tommy's recent comments in various press settings have made something unmistakably clear. He views the Will Smith story not as a tragedy, but as a predictable outcome. A man who gave the industry everything it wanted. Perfect image, perfect control, perfect performance. Eventually reached the limits of what performance can sustain. And when reality intruded at the Oscars in the form of one joke from Chris Rock, the system failed because it was never designed to handle authentic human response. It was only designed to manage the performance. Tommy Lee Jones, without naming Will Smith directly in every instance, has been painting a portrait of what the industry does to the people it consumes. And the portrait looks a lot like Will Smith's trajectory. The Avatar theory proven, Jada's memoir and the separation that changed everything. Here is where the story gets genuinely disturbing. Here is where Martin Lawrence's loyalty, Tommy Lee Jones's institutional critique, Jim Carrey's Avatar theory, and Dave Chappelle's Frankenstein analysis all converge into one devastating truth. In October 2023, Jada Pinkett Smith released her memoir, Worthy, and buried inside that book, delivered almost casually, as if it were not a bombshell detonating inside the entire Will Smith narrative, was a revelation that recontextualized everything. Jada and Will had been separated since 2016. Let that breathe for a moment. By the time Will Smith walked onto that Oscar stage on March 27, 2022, by the time he slapped Chris Rock across the face in front of 15 million viewers to defend his wife's honor, he and Jada had not been together as a married couple in any traditional sense for 6 years. 6 years. The famous Red Table Talk episode where they appeared to process the entanglement with August Alsina together on camera. That happened during their separation. The unified front they presented publicly throughout that entire period. Performance. Every red carpet. Every interview. Every display of partnership and devotion. Performance. Now go back to Jim Carrey's Avatar theory. Jim said Will didn't slap Chris Rock to defend Jada the person. He slapped Chris Rock to defend the image of being Jada's husband, the character he had been playing for the public, the persona that his entire professional identity was built around protecting. The Jada revelation proved Jim Carrey right beyond any reasonable doubt.
I understand, how shocking that was for people, man.
Right.
Will Smith committed assault on live television not because his marriage was threatened. He committed assault because the performance of his marriage was threatened. The Avatar could not survive the joke, even though the reality it supposedly represented had already ceased to exist 6 years earlier. And here's the question that should keep you up at night. Who knew? Who inside Will's circle knew the marriage was functionally over while Will was still performing the role of devoted husband? Who inside Hollywood knew the public image was constructed? Who had the information and chose to protect the investment anyway? Martin Lawrence has said publicly that he does not get into Will and Jada's private business. That is a friend maintaining a boundary, and that is entirely legitimate. But Martin also said Will had been carrying more than people knew for a long time. How much of what Will was carrying was the weight of maintaining a false image for years? How much of the eruption at the Oscars was 6 years of pretending to be something he wasn't, finally hitting a breaking point at the worst possible moment? Dave Chappelle addressed this during a stand-up set in late 2023. He said the Jada revelation was the saddest part of the whole saga, not because of the entanglement, not even because of the separation itself, but because it proved the performance had consumed Will completely. He was so deep inside the role of Jada's devoted husband that he assaulted someone to protect a marriage that didn't functionally exist. Dave called it method acting, taken to an insane extreme. And he's right. This is what happens when the industry's demand for image maintenance becomes more powerful than a human being's grip on their own reality. The standing ovation. Hollywood's true values exposed. There is one moment in this entire story that functions as a perfect X-ray of Hollywood's soul, and it is not the slap. The slap is the symptom. The X-ray is the standing ovation. Within an hour of Will Smith assaulting Chris Rock on that stage, Hollywood's most powerful people rose to their feet and applauded him. Not quietly, not politely. A standing ovation. Jim Carrey called it sickening. He appeared on CBS Mornings 3 days after the incident and used language that was as close to fury as Jim Carrey publicly goes. He called Hollywood spineless. He said the industry had revealed itself to be the cool club no more. He said he would have sued Will Smith for $200 million, not for the slap itself, but for the message the slap sent about the relationship between words and violence, about the foundational principle that you do not respond to someone's speech with your fists. Dave Chappelle connected the standing ovation directly to why he walked away from a $50 million Comedy Central deal in 2005. He had seen this before, an industry that does not operate on principles, an industry that operates on profit. And when someone generates $9 billion in ticket sales, you do not hold them accountable. You give them a standing ovation because the asset must be protected. Martin Lawrence, in his characteristically measured way, refused to endorse the standing ovation when pressed on it directly. He talked about forgiveness, about humanity, about people needing to make mistakes and grow. But he conspicuously did not defend the standing ovation itself. He did not say the room did the right thing. He navigated around it. That navigation is telling, because Martin Lawrence was not in the Dolby Theater that night. He watched it from the outside. And for Martin to refuse to defend the response of the room when he is someone who would genuinely lay down professionally for Will Smith, if he thought it was right, tells you everything about how he actually feels about what Hollywood did. The standing ovation wasn't about Will Smith. It never was. It was about the industry protecting its investment. It was about an assembled room of powerful people making a collective financial calculation in real time and deciding that Will Smith's earning potential outweighed the assault that had just occurred on their stage. Tommy Lee Jones has spoken about Hollywood's selective morality with a bluntness that few other veterans will match. He has pointed out the obvious truth that no unknown actor, no one without Will's $9 billion of box office power behind them, would have received anything other than removal from the ceremony, potential arrest, and a career-ending blacklist. The two-tier system of accountability in Hollywood is not hidden. It is simply never discussed honestly by the people who benefit from it. Tommy Lee Jones benefits from nothing by exposing this system. He has never been inside the inner circle. He has never been protected by the machine. He is speaking from the outside, from a place of complete independence. And what he is describing is a system that creates Will Smiths by rewarding performance over humanity, and then acts surprised when the performance collapses. The career, fallout, what actually happened, and what it means. Let's talk about what has actually happened to Will Smith's career since the slap, because the consequences are not simple, and understanding them reveals even more about how Hollywood operates. Immediately after the Oscar incident, Will resigned from the Academy and received a 10-year ban from attending Academy events. His prestige project, Emancipation, which Apple had purchased for $120 million, and which was positioned as his follow-up Oscar vehicle, was released quietly in December 2022 with minimal promotion. Critics were lukewarm. Audiences largely ignored it. His Q score, the metric Hollywood uses to determine which actors can open a movie and justify large budgets, fell from 39 before the slap to 19 by early 2024. One of the most dramatic collapses in Q score history for a major actor. Netflix had a project ready to go called Fast and Loose. They paused it immediately after the slap, and it has never been revived. Then came Bad Boys, Ride or Die, in June 2024. Sony's calculated bet, Will's most bulletproof franchise, the one property with enough goodwill and enough Martin Lawrence built in to give audiences cover for showing up without feeling like they were endorsing the slap. The result was complicated. The film opened to $56 million domestically and $146 million globally. For context, its predecessor Bad Boys for Life in 2020 opened to $62 million domestically and went on to gross $426 million worldwide. Ride or Die performed moderately but nowhere near franchise expectations. Industry analysts were honest about what the numbers meant. Will Smith can still draw audiences to a Bad Boys film with Martin Lawrence beside him. The franchise provides cover. But can he open an original movie as a solo lead? Can he carry a prestige project? Can he anchor something that requires audiences to show up specifically for Will Smith rather than for an established brand? Those questions remain unanswered, and Hollywood's silence speaks loudly. No major studio rushed to sign Will for their next big project after Ride or Die. His agents at CAA were reportedly calling studio executives aggressively in the weeks before the release, hoping moderate success would unlock the next commitment. That announcement never came. And then, in early 2025, the situation got exponentially worse. A violinist named Brian King Joseph, who had toured with Will Smith, filed a lawsuit alleging sexual harassment, retaliation, and wrongful termination. According to the complaint, Joseph returned to his hotel room in Las Vegas during the tour to find unknown items, including HIV medication, hospital discharge papers, and a handwritten note suggesting someone planned to return for a sexual encounter. When Joseph reported this to Will's team and hotel security, he was allegedly fired and told he was fabricating the entire incident. Will's legal team has denied all of it, calling the allegations baseless and reckless. But timing has a way of mattering in Hollywood. And the timing of this lawsuit, just as Will was attempting to rebuild his image, just as some audiences were beginning to be willing to forgive the Oscar incident, could not be worse. Whether the allegations are proven or dismissed, they have reopened every question about Will's behavior and character at exactly the moment he could least afford it. Dave Chappelle, in a recent stand-up set, made a pointed observation about how scandals work. He said, "When someone shows you who they really are through one public incident, it tends to open the floodgates. Other people with other stories feel permission to come forward." He did not name Will specifically. He did not need to. The bigger truth. What all of this exposes about the system. Here is where we zoom out, because Martin Lawrence and Tommy Lee Jones, and Jim Carrey and Dave Chappelle, and Chris Rock's carefully worded Netflix special, all of these voices together are not just talking about Will Smith. They are talking about a system, and we need to reckon with that system honestly. Hollywood creates avatars and sells them to the public as if they are real people. The industry manufactures personality, curates image, and trains its products to perform authenticity so convincingly that even they start to believe it. And then, when those products reach their limit, when the mask slips, when the performance breaks down, when the human being trapped inside the avatar finally breaks through, the industry does one of two things. If you are profitable, it protects you. It manages the crisis, it spins the narrative, it gives you standing ovations while the world watches in horror. If you are not profitable, it destroys you. There is no middle ground. There is no genuine accountability. The standing ovation was not about Will Smith, the man. It was about Will Smith, the asset. Jim Carrey walked away from $20 million because he refused to compromise his values. He knows exactly what the industry demanded of him, and he knows exactly what it cost him to say no. Dave Chappelle walked away from $50 million for the same reason. Both men paid a price for their authenticity that most performers are not willing to pay. Will Smith did not walk away. He gave the industry everything it wanted: perfect image, perfect control, perfect performance, decade after decade. And the industry rewarded him with $9 billion and a standing ovation even when he snapped. But here's the darkest part of this story. Here's the question that Martin Lawrence hints at when he talks about Will carrying more than people knew, that Tommy Lee Jones points toward when he describes what the industry does to the people it selects and shapes. What if Will Smith never had a chance? What if the system identified Will at 19 years old, a brilliant, charismatic, extraordinarily talented kid from West Philadelphia, and began shaping him so skillfully that he never developed the internal architecture required to separate himself from what the industry built? What if 30 years of being told to be the product, to maintain the image, protect the investment, perform the authenticity, actually worked? What if the avatar genuinely became more real to him than the person underneath? That is not a defense of the slap. What Will Smith did was wrong. The use of violence to silence speech, any joke, no matter how uncomfortable, is wrong, and it carried real consequences for Chris Rock, who was simply doing his job. But it is a diagnosis of something that should disturb all of us, because we participated in building the system that produced this outcome. Our complicity, the uncomfortable mirror. Here is the thing that Jim Carrey and Dave Chappelle both said that nobody wanted to hear. We built this. Every ticket purchased for a Will Smith movie, every Fresh Prince episode watched, every award show vote cast, every piece of content consumed, every time we rewarded the performance instead of demanding the person, we were feeding the system that eventually broke Will Smith. We wanted the Fresh Prince. We wanted the action hero. We wanted the family man who could do no wrong. We wanted the avatar, not the person. We wanted the product so badly, so consistently, that we gave the industry permission to manufacture it and protect it at any cost. And when the person finally emerged, flawed, violent, deeply troubled, trapped inside an image he had maintained for 30 years, we were shocked, as if we had played no role in creating the conditions that made this outcome inevitable. Martin Lawrence loves Will Smith. That love is real. And in that love is a kind of pain that is not often discussed publicly. The pain of watching someone you care about be consumed by a system that rewards performance and punishes humanity. Tommy Lee Jones has watched this industry for 50 years. He has maintained his integrity by refusing to give the machine what it demands. He has paid a price for that refusal. And when he speaks about what Hollywood does to the people who comply, the Will Smiths, the products that the industry builds and profits from, and ultimately fails to protect from themselves. There is something underneath his words that sounds a lot like grief for what could have been. What should we be doing differently? What would it look like to stop rewarding the avatar and start demanding the person? What would it mean to consume entertainment in a way that doesn't incentivize the machine to manufacture more broken human beings? Those are not rhetorical questions. I genuinely want you to think about them. Drop your answers in the comments. Because this conversation matters, and it needs voices beyond just the celebrities willing to break their silence. Where Will Smith goes from here? As of early 2026, Will Smith exists in a strange, uncomfortable limbo. He is not cancelled. Bad Boys. Ride or Die proved there is still an audience for him in the right context, with the right franchise, with Martin Lawrence standing beside him to provide cover. He is still one of the most recognizable names in entertainment history. But he is also not back. The $9 billion box office titan who could open any film, carry any story, anchor any project, that version of Will Smith may not be recoverable. The Q-score collapse, the lawsuit, the ongoing conversation about what the Oscar incident revealed about his character, all of it has made studios cautious in ways that cannot be quickly undone. His next film choice will tell us a great deal. Whether he chooses to chase franchise safety or attempt something more authentic, more vulnerable, more genuinely human, that choice will be revealing. But here is what Martin Lawrence and Tommy Lee Jones, in their different ways, from their different vantage points, are ultimately saying about Will Smith's path forward. The only way out is through authenticity. The avatar is gone. The performance is over. The only version of Will Smith that has any chance of genuine redemption is the actual person, flawed, struggling, human, not the product the industry built. Whether Will Smith can find that person after 30 years of performing someone else is the real question. And the answer to that question will tell us more about the cost of Hollywood's avatar manufacturing system than any award show incident ever could. Martin Lawrence and Tommy Lee Jones did not sit down together and plan an exposé. But the truths they have been telling, in interviews, in press junkets, in stand-up sets, in pointed silences and careful word choices, have been assembling themselves into a portrait that is impossible to ignore. Together with Jim Carrey's philosophical diagnosis, Dave Chappelle's institutional critique, and Chris Rock's quiet, devastating testimony, they have built something more powerful than any planned takedown could achieve. They have told the truth, independently, consistently, from the inside. And the truth they are telling is not really about Will Smith. It is about all of us. It is about what we reward when we buy tickets and stream content and applaud performances and look away from the human cost of the avatar machine. It is about what the entertainment industry becomes when profit is the only moral value and accountability is negotiable based on box office history. Hollywood cannot unring this bell. The standing ovation cannot be taken back. The avatar theory cannot be unheard. The selective accountability cannot be denied. 2 generations of Hollywood insiders spoke truth to power, and that truth is going to echo for a long, long time. So now I want to hear from you. Do you think Will Smith is capable of genuine redemption? Not the industry-managed, PR-approved version, but the real thing? Is Hollywood capable of reforming the system that created this situation? And what does your role as an audience member look like going forward? Drop your thoughts in the comments below. If this video opened your eyes to something you hadn't fully considered before, hit that like button and subscribe. We go deep on the stories that mainstream media touches and then looks away from. Turn on notifications, because the next one is coming, and you do not want to miss it. Stay curious, stay honest, and remember, most of what Hollywood sells you is a performance. The question is whether you're willing to keep buying.